welcome to the final installment of the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Legislative Caucus 2020 virtual meeting. I'm Indiana Senator Ed Charbonneau, and chair of the caucus, and I am thrilled to be here from beautiful downtown Fish Creek, Wisconsin. We're all familiar at this point with Zoom. I think we're probably zoomed out. So we're going to show that page, I think, on virtual meetings, but I'm not going to spend any time talking about that. Then if you got questions, you can go to the chat room and send an email to Lisa. Once again, Lisa has us on a short leash, so I'm just going to get right into the program with another outstanding one that Lisa has put together. In each of the three previous sessions, we focused on an issue on the GLLC's policy agenda. Since we're organized around the principles of assuring access to safe, affordable drinking water in our region, those sessions all focused on some kind of contaminant. Today, we turn our attention to partner organizations, and that's one of the things that I have always been a proponent of, and reaching out with many of the organizations that are focused on the same kinds of things that we are, and join partnerships with them. Today, we're going to learn about climate resilience, priorities of coastal communities, an innovative investment platform organized by the region's governors and premiers. Now, I think along the way, we'll also learn a little something about the partner organizations that we look for opportunities to engage productively as we all focus on pretty much the same ultimate mission. Today, our speakers I'd like to thank them for taking the time to join us, share their knowledge and expertise, and we'll start with Erica Jensen and Eric Brown, who will be speaking about the Great Lakes Commission's work on climate resilience for our 2021 Burkholz Institute. As you all know, I'm sure we decided to focus on helping our coastal communities become climate resilient. So this is a very timely topic for us to be hearing about. Again, if there's time at the end of each of the presentations, we'll take some questions. If not, we may move on and ask questions at the end if time permits. So with that, Erica, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Senator Charbonneau, and thank you to you and Lisa for inviting us to present this morning. And good morning to everybody who is on the line, including I'd like to say hello to several of our commissioners who are joining this morning, Senator Rest, Senator Rude, and Representative Schultz. Good morning to everybody, and thanks for joining on this beautiful fall morning. For those of you who I don't know, my name is Erica Jensen. I'm the Interim Executive Director at the Great Lakes Commission. I've been director for a little over a month now, but I have been with the Great Lakes Commission for more than 14 years. And I've really been pleased to see our relationship with the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Legislative Caucus develop and grow over that time. And I appreciate our ongoing collaboration between the Commission and the caucus, including last year's Burkholz Institute on nutrient pollution. And given the excellent work the Institute was able to accomplish, we're also excited to hear that the next area of focus for the Burkholz Institute will be on resilience. And so we're looking forward to seeing the results of that effort, as well as opportunities to coordinate. And just on a personal note, I also wanted to mention that once upon a time, I interned for Senator Burkholz, and so I'm just especially pleased to see her legacy carried on in this way. And so this morning, I'm just going to take a couple of minutes to reorient this group for those of you who may not be familiar to the GLC and some of our current priorities before I hand it off to my colleague, Eric Brown, to discuss our climate resilience work in more detail. So next slide, please. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Great Lakes Commission, we are an interstate compact agency established by the 8 Great Lakes states in 1955, and we were given congressional consent in 1968. In addition, the provinces of Ontario and Quebec participate as associate members through our Declaration of Partnership. And the Commission plays an important role for the region by providing a forum for the states and provinces to convene, share information, and speak with a common voice on regional priorities. Next slide. Just briefly, the Commission is made up of delegations from each of the 10 jurisdictions and is governed by a board of directors. And we have a professional staff of about 20 based here in Ann Arbor, Michigan that helps the Commission carry out its important work. Next slide. The Commission's current strategic plan was adopted in 2017, and it lays out our vision for the region as well as our mission. And again, that's focused on a convening collaborative role and a mechanism for the states and provinces to speak with one voice on Great Lakes issues for the benefit of current and future generations. Next slide. Our strategic plan also lays out the ways in which we carry out our mission, our core competencies, as well as 7 program areas across which we work. So our core competencies include things like facilitation and consensus building, policy coordination and advocacy, communication outreach, and other activities. And we work across a variety of areas that are important to regional management of Great Lakes water resources. Next slide. And as an example of this, each year the Great Lakes Commission releases a statement of federal priorities for the U.S. administration and Congress and advocates for specific programs, policies, and fundings. And in 2020, this has included things like the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, funding for drinking and wastewater infrastructure, improving the Great Lakes navigation system, protections against aquatic invasive species, reducing nutrient and other non-point source pollution to improve water quality, building climate resiliency for the basin, and also investing in information and data to allow us to track our progress on these important areas. Next slide. And then just quickly, I wanted to take a moment to invite all of you to our 2020 annual meeting, which will be held online this year. It will be held November 17th through the 19th. The theme of this year's meeting is collaborating towards a resilient Great Lakes future. And we'll have several panel sessions related to the themes of collaboration and resilience. And there will be opportunities for the Legislative Caucus to also participate and provide remarks in our meeting. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Eric to talk in more detail about our climate resilience work, which will also be a big component of our November meeting.
Great, thank you, Erica. And thanks to all of you for joining us this morning, and thanks for the opportunity. As Erica said, we're really excited about the ongoing collaboration we have with the Legislative Caucus, and we're very excited about the next Burkholz Institute's focal point. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for us to share expertise and work toward a more resilient future. So with that, Jenny, would you move it to the next slide, please? Thank you. So I'd like to give a little bit of an overview of the Great Lakes Commission's work in climate resilience and then talk to you a little bit about where we're going, because I think that'll help us identify some opportunities for ongoing partnership. We began our foray into climate resilience at our annual meeting in Quebec City last year in 2019, when our commissioners began discussing the Commission's role in dealing with the effects of climate change in the Great Lakes Basin. And that the work that came out of that wound up being a focused special committee that was time bound to come up with, over a short period of time, a framework for action that would outline the commission's role going forward in climate resilience. So take this big concept and try to distill it down into a few things that fit with the Great Lakes Basin Compact, which Erica mentioned is the foundation for the Great Lakes Commission and the partnership that we have through that compact. In January of 2020, the Commission unanimously agreed to adopt a framework for action that is going to build out and guide our work over the next year and into the future. And we've been working on that throughout 2020 so far. So Jenny, next slide, please. So we as in the Commission, commissioners adopted this framework for action, which has 7 different recommendations. I'll go through a few of them. I don't want to read them all off to you, but you have these in your materials. The first 2 recommendations were really foundational for us. One is to establish a standing committee, which we've of course done. We have several of the legislators that are here on this call participating in that. And Lisa Hanairo has also been a participant in that. So we thank you for your ongoing work and perspective serving with that standing committee. And our second recommendation was to develop a common definition for resilience in the Great Lakes Basin. We'll come back to that shortly. We have a definition that the committee has agreed to that we're going to recommend to the Commission later this year. Recommendation 3, I think, is really an important thing for us to take a minute to talk about, is to develop a compilation and clearinghouse of progress and efforts at all levels. So we know that there's a lot of work going on with each of the federal governments, within each of the states and provinces, and then also within municipalities and some of our non-governmental partners to make a more resilient Great Lakes Basin. We know that a lot of those efforts are complementary, some of them are overlapping, and of course, when we look at the Great Lakes as a watershed and as the Great Lakes Basin, connecting those efforts across jurisdictional boundaries will be a very helpful way for us to make sure we are being efficient and effective and sharing the expertise and results and lessons learned that each of you and your jurisdictions are seeing on a daily basis. So we hope to sort of host a clearinghouse or a compilation of those efforts so that it's available to you all as you're developing policy and looking into different programs that work to address some of the needs that you're seeing within your jurisdictions, taking best practices from across the basin and extending them into other jurisdictions. Next slide, please, Jenny. The next 4 recommendations you see on this slide, I think, can be grouped a little bit. I'll talk first about recommendations 5 and 6, which are to establish a process for sharing data and evaluating risks and challenges, and then establish a regular dialogue focused on climate resilience. We're working to do that through the work of our standing committee, which is not only bound to commissioners, but also subject matter experts within each of the states and provinces. We have some federal agencies serving in an advisory capacity to help guide the work and make sure the work they're doing is captured in this effort. And to continue that dialogue going forward. We will also, as Erica mentioned, have some substantial time dedicated to this at our annual meeting in November to begin what we hope will be a regular dialogue about resilience throughout the Great Lakes Basin and across all agencies and jurisdictional boundaries. Looking at recommendations 4 and 7, I think those can be grouped as well. Developing a long-term outlook and action plan in recommendation 4, and then a clear and consistent consensus-based policy statement in recommendation number 7. That's something that the committee is working hard to develop right now. We're going through a process that's very collaborative to identify high-level goals, short, medium, and long-term objectives in order to meet those goals, and the activities that each of the stakeholders can engage in to reach those goals. So we're developing that to have a draft available for our discussion in our annual meeting in November. And we look forward to working with you all to build that out, finalize it, and then come up with an implementation plan that we can all rally around to guide our work in the months and years to come. Next slide, please, Jenny. So I know I only have a few minutes left, and I promised Lisa that I would stay on time, but I would like to share with you the draft definition for a resilient Great Lakes Basin that our committee has come up with. I'm not a fan of reading slides, but I think it would be a good one to do here. You can see that we're taking a very inclusive and broad look at resilience. The definition that our group has come up with is a resilient Great Lakes Basin is one in which communities, infrastructure, ecosystems, and the economy can withstand, adapt to, and recover from climate-related stressors and changing conditions to ensure equitable and inclusive economic and environmental well-being across the basin. The group came around this because we know that the interests of the Great Lakes Basin are wide and varied, and so are the communities. So as each community deals with events that are unique to it, we also know that there are themes and challenges that stretch across the entire Great Lakes Basin. And they're not going to be the same over time. Right now, of course, many folks are dealing with high lake levels. We know the Great Lakes are a highly variable system, but they've been more variable recently than they have historically. So that'll be a big focal point, I know, for this committee, but we wanted to remain flexible so that we can adapt to the issues of the day and the concerns that are emergent. Next slide, please. And we want to make sure, besides being inclusive and flexible, one of the big focal points for our committee is that we do not in any way want to reinvent the wheel. As I mentioned before, there's a ton of effort going on within each of the jurisdictions and across the basin. We want to be additive. We want to help highlight and coordinate existing efforts and connect them. I mean, I think that's the real need that our commissioners articulated when we first got going on this path, was that there's a lot of good work going on. How can we connect that? How can we learn from one another and really scale up some of these efforts to make more and faster progress on a basin-wide scale? So eliminating silos that exist across the different levels of government, but also within each of the individual jurisdictions. We know that the issues that we're facing right now and the challenges related to some additional stressors are not unique to any particular geopolitical boundary. So we want to make sure we're looking at a watershed scale. And then utilize the existing forums that we have, such as the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Legislative Caucus, the Great Lakes Commission, the Cities Initiative, the Great Lakes Governors and Premiers, all the great groups that are here on this call today. Utilize those fora to share the expertise, identify opportunities, and address those common challenges. We don't want to create something new for everyone to, another new series of meetings, but we know that this is a big focal point for folks. And as the commission and these other groups continue to work together, we want to utilize the time and energy that you all put into those things on these particular issues. Next slide, please, Jenny. So I know I've gone a little bit over. I will wrap it up here. For our next steps, as I mentioned, we're working on an action plan that will establish some shared goals and set some timeframes, and also identify roles, because we know that not everyone can or should be doing everything in this space. We will share a draft of those goals at our November meeting. We want feedback on that. So we're very excited about the partnership we have with you all. We want to make sure we're capturing these things correctly, that we're not missing anything, and that we have an actionable set of goals that each of you can work toward in your daily work, in your capitals. And then we want to work to implement that in 2021 and beyond. So we see resilience as a theme that's really binding together a lot of the work that we do basin-wide and across jurisdictions. We want to make sure that we're tracking our progress toward that and that we're working cohesively and coherently together. So with that, Jenny, I've put a slide on here with our contact information. I know that's in your book. Thank you for the opportunity to share our work and what we hope to do with you. And I look forward to, I think, questions after the other groups have wrapped up. Lisa, is that right? Or I'm happy to take questions at any point.
Actually, we will entertain questions now if anyone has a question.
Great.
I see that Assemblyman Mark Walczyk has his hand raised, so I'm going to ask you to unmute your line.
Great, thanks very much. Eric, saw on the draft statement for the committee. I don't know if you can pull that slide back. Something about equitable and inclusive social. I was just wondering if you could sort of explain the crux of the idea there.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me pull that up on my screen as well. So I think we know that the effects of climate-related stressors are not necessarily evenly felt within communities throughout the basin. Coastal communities have different challenges than communities that are upstream, and communities with different, I think, socioeconomic communities with different socioeconomic status and levels of wealth also have different resources with which to deal with those stressors. So I think there was a focal point among our committee members to recognize that these effects are not evenly experienced, and that the resources to deal with them at the local level aren't necessarily equally distributed. So I think they just wanted to recognize that and keep that in mind as they develop recommendations and policy, that there are going to be areas which might need more assistance than others.
Okay. Yeah, I just, obviously as a politician, I see social issues pop up on something like this, and I love to discuss and debate, but certainly in the New York State legislature, those kind of issues can make it tougher for people to come together on other things. So I wouldn't want it to be a distractor, but if I'm reading you right, it's sort of socio-economic communities is sort of the crux there.
Yeah, I think so. And just recognizing that, these effects aren't necessarily felt, evenly. There are some areas that are more impacted than others.
Okay.
And
thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, I think with that, I would certainly like to thank Erica and Eric for the great presentation, and it's great to have groups like the Great Lakes Commission that are willing to collaborate with the Great Lakes Legislative Caucus, and we appreciate their working with us on the nutrients and on blue accounting, and we're also grateful to be part of the standing committee on climate resilience. And excuse me, certainly I and everyone else on the commission looks forward to partnering with you folks next year. Sorry about that. I don't know what's going on here, but partnering with you on the Burkholz Institute next year. We'll now turn to the needs of our, one other thing I should say, anyone that has questions, you can put them into the chat room or raise your hand, and we will recognize you and you can ask the question. But now we're going to need to turn to the needs of coastal communities, and meeting those needs is an important part of the caucus's policy agenda. So I, and I'm sure everybody else, is really looking forward to hear our next two speakers, and I would certainly like to welcome and thank for being here, Matt Doss and Eamon Horanlani. Matt, why don't you start things off?
Actually, it's Eamon here. I'll start off. Thank you so much for inviting us here today. We're really excited to have this opportunity. As you might, if we could have, yeah, the first slide, wonderful. The Great Lakes St. Lawrence Cities Initiative is a collection of over 100 mayors. And if you go to the next slide, there we go. And we have a very simple vision. Our vision is to bring the mayors of all municipalities that rely on the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence from both nations to come together to work with their federal, state, provincial governments and other organizations to protect the ecosystem through development and implementation of a comprehensive Great Lakes protection and restoration plan. And we've been working on that for 17 years now. So we're almost old enough to drink in Quebec. A couple more years before we can do it down in the States. If you want to go to the next slide and just keep talking, it will give you a notion of just how broad our membership is. We just want to show the next slide, which will have all our members. Yeah. As you can see, we stretch from almost the Gulf of St. Lawrence all the way to the wilds of Minnesota and everywhere in between. We've got members in all 8 states in the 2 provinces. And like I said, we have about 100 active members right now, but we have a reach of about over 300, 350 that we deal with in varying capacities. We're administered by a 15-member board, bi-national board, divided into 4 regions: the Upper Great Lakes, the Lower Great Lakes, Ontario, and Quebec. And right now our chairperson is the mayor of Sheboygan, Wisconsin, Mike Vandersteen. And we work on a whole range of issues: waterfront restoration, water infrastructure, AIS, climate change, shoreline resilience, nutrients, water withdrawals, and anything that will affect your municipality's ability to have safe shorelines, coastlines, and drinking water. It comes across our desk at some point. If we could have the next slide. This past year has been very active for us, and you can also make it into 2 eras: the pre-COVID era and the post-COVID era. Before COVID set in, we were very active in the Great Lakes Day in Washington, D.C., and we also were at the annual mayors meeting of a U.S. Conference of Mayors, also in Washington. So we had 2 trips to Washington before COVID set in. On the Canadian side, we released the action plan to protect the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence. It's Action Plan 2020-2030, and that's actually part of 3 different reports. We did 1 report for the Great Lakes, 1 for the St. Lawrence, and we did a joint one, which was going to be released on Earth Day at Parliament Hill with the Minister of the Environment for the Federal Government of Canada, and we had the Quebec and the Ontario Environment Ministers on deck to probably be involved in that as well. But COVID got in the way of that. So we did release those reports. We released one in a cyber format, and that is helping drive our policy on the Canadian side, and there's a lot of great interest. But with COVID, our members, well, they had a lot on their plates between the making sure their communities were safe from a public health stance, the various protests that arose in different communities, the upheaval that happened in every single jurisdiction. Our member and the lack of revenue our members are bringing in. It's been a real year of, well, unprecedented upheaval in almost every one of our communities along the shorelines. With that, we brought in a water stimulus restoration initiative, and that was our opportunity to work with the federal governments of the United States and Canada, say we can put people back to work. And we developed a plan that could put up to 500,000 people in the Great Lakes region back to work while restoring coastal resilience and water infrastructure in communities. This got great interest by both federal governments, and on the Canadian side, some money was able to be allocated through the COVID response, and they did make water infrastructure part of the 3 billion of COVID money. And on the American side, it's still something that many people are talking about. We've also worked with the Thames River Phosphorus Reduction Collaborative. This is something we've been working with on the Thames River, which leads into Lake Ontario. The first year was very focused just on Ontario, but in years two, this past year, they've really tried to expand it to include every jurisdiction that flows into Lake Ontario. So like Ohio, Erie, a little bit of New York, and a little bit of Michigan, to see what are the best practices and what are some new sciences and new technologies we can use to reduce phosphorus. This is part of a 4-year project of trying out new technologies and new best practices and actually getting data on how effective they are. So we have 2 years of data right now. As always, we like to collaborate with other organizations, such as all the organizations here. But we have been doing a fair bit of work with the Mississippi River's mayors, especially on the American side, to ensure that Washington understands the opportunity of putting people back to work while protecting our waterways. And with our AGM being canceled due to COVID, we've turned all the topics that we're going to be at our AGM into monthly webinar series in both English and French. And these have had some great uptake. We've had up to 150 people on these, and these are the municipal officials from all across the region coming on to discuss various issues such as water levels, waterfront restoration, phosphorus, invasive species, and a whole range of other things. We have one of those a month. And with that, I'll turn it over to Matt.
Thank you, Eamon. Can we go to the next slide, please? All right, good morning, everybody. This is Matt Doss. I'm the U.S. Policy Advisor, so I'm sort of Eamon's counterpart in the United States, and I'm thrilled to be working for Great Lakes and St. Lawrence cities. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about upcoming priorities for the remainder of this year and then going into 2021. As Eamon mentioned, a big priority for our cities this year has been stimulus funding, both to address ongoing challenges related to water infrastructure and coastal resilience, as well as just helping our cities that have been heavily impacted from a fiscal and economic perspective by the impacts of the COVID pandemic. So we are continuing to follow this activity both in Washington and Ottawa. I think as most of you know that there's been ongoing discussions about a new COVID stimulus package in Congress. There's been quite a bit of gyrations on that, and that seems to change daily almost. But we're continuing to follow that, and hopefully hope that there will be an additional package before the end of the year. We also will be looking at the completion of the FY21 federal appropriations for the U.S. government, continuing to advocate for funding for our ongoing priorities related to water infrastructure, Great Lakes restoration, and coastal resilience. And then looking into 2021, we will continue our policy and advocacy work with Congress and the Canadian Parliament. We're very excited to have a new parliamentary Great Lakes St. Lawrence task force in Canada. Eamon has been heavily involved with that group, so this is somewhat analogous to the Great Lakes Congressional Task Force in Congress that's been in place for some time. So that will provide a voice on Great Lakes and St. Lawrence issues with the Canadian Parliament. We will also be obviously looking at our policy and advocacy agenda with the incoming administration in Washington, regardless of which party is there. We continue to collaborate with other regional organizations, including the Great Lakes Legislative Caucus and the Great Lakes Commission and several others on a suite of joint common priorities for the Great Lakes, presenting sort of a unified voice. So we will continue to do that. A couple new things that we're really excited about. We are forming a Mayor's Commission on Water Equity that will involve 10 or 12 of our mayors from both the US and Canada to take a hard look at water equity issues. And these issues aren't necessarily new, but the COVID pandemic and some of the impacts have really shone a bright light on the disparate impacts on water equity around the basin and particularly in our cities. So that commission will be taking a hard look at those issues and making recommendations to our full body about solutions, cross-sector collaborations, and opportunities to share ideas and best practices to help make a more equitable water future for Great Lakes cities. Also, we will be taking a hard look at coastal resilience, and we've talked about that quite a bit. Both the Great Lakes Commission and the Great Lakes Legislative Caucus are working intently in this area. And our cities are really on the front lines when it comes to dealing with issues related to coastal resilience, whether it be coastal erosion resulting from high lake levels or impacts from more frequent severe storm events and flooding. So our members have really been hammered, and we're going to be looking at this pretty intently. And I'll talk a little bit more about some upcoming actions in a moment. Next, we'll continue to work on phosphorus reduction efforts. Eamon mentioned the Thames River Phosphorus Reduction Collaborative, which will be ongoing. We'll continue to look for ways that we can collaborate between our municipal governments and the agricultural sector. And we were pleased to work with a number of partners in the past on this, and we'll continue to look at how we can work in this area in the future. A couple final things. Invasive species and Asian carp continue to be a priority for our organization, like it is for others on this call. We're looking hard at what we can do to advance control actions to prevent Asian carp from getting into the Great Lakes. We are hopeful that we will move forward with the Brandon Road project that would develop and deploy a series of control technologies at the Brandon Road Lock and Dam on the Illinois River. So a number of critical actions need to move forward in that area. And then finally, water levels. We've seen, of course, historically high lake levels this year and over the last year or so. Again, this is heavily impacting many of our cities. So we will be looking at what some of the options and opportunities are to address those challenges and those issues, particularly looking at the work of the International Joint Commission and other entities out there that are taking a hard look at this issue. Next slide, please.
Yes.
So finally, just some specific upcoming activities. I already mentioned our work on sort of as we get into the end game of the FY21 appropriations, that those consultations will be moving forward in the Canadian Parliament, and then in the US Congress. There is a continuing resolution through early December. When Congress comes back after the elections, they'll be finalizing those appropriations. So again, we'll be taking a hard look at and trying to engage to get financial assistance to cities, coastal erosion, Brandon Road authorization, and funding for other priorities. A specific activity that we are taking on related to coastal resilience, we know there's a huge need here, but we really want to have a better understanding of what the specific needs are among Great Lakes and St. Lawrence cities. So we are going to be deploying a survey of Great Lakes and St. Lawrence cities later this year to help us better understand what their levels of capacity are, what their needs are, what types of information and resources they're already using, what additional resources and tools they might need. So that survey will be going out hopefully in December to both US and Canadian cities and other local levels of government. And we hope that that will provide critical information to help guide work that we are doing, as well as work of the Great Lakes Commission and the Great Lakes Legislative Caucus. We're really excited to hear about the Burkholz Institute's focus on resilience coming up next year. So we will definitely collaborate with all of you to share this information and let it inform the work that we do moving forward. I mentioned the Mayor's Commission on Water Equity. We will be convening that group in late November or early December, and then it will continue to work into 2021, probably leading into recommendations for our annual meeting next May. We also are convening an advisory council to our mayors. This will be a body composed of a variety of stakeholders, both from mayors, corporate sponsors, agencies and others working on issues critical to Great Lakes and St. Lawrence cities. The initial focus of that group will be on shoreline resilience. So we hope that we'll get some good recommendations from them to the city's initiative. We will continue our webinar series, and just on you can see there 2 upcoming webinars, October 22nd on Asian carp and November 19th on harmful algal blooms. We mentioned the new Parliament of Canada Great Lakes St. Lawrence Task Force that we think is going to be an important voice for Great Lakes issues in the Canadian Parliament. We will continue to engage with provincial governments in Canada, Ontario, and Quebec on issues related to the shoreline flooding and erosion. Our mid-year meeting is typically held in January in Washington. We time that with the annual meeting of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. We still plan to meet. Obviously, it's still unclear whether we'll be able to meet in person or we'll be meeting via webinar, so that's yet to be determined. And finally, our annual meeting is scheduled for late May, May 25th through the 27th in St. Catharines, Ontario. And we're very excited to be going there. Again, we're crossing our fingers, hoping that we will be able to meet in person, but that'll obviously have to be revisited in light of circumstances related to the pandemic. So we likely will be reaching out to a number of you, both state and provincial legislators, as well as our partners on the phone here about opportunities to collaborate in a number of areas here. But we've got some exciting work coming up, full scope of work ahead of us, and look forward to moving forward with all of you and appreciate the time on today's webinar.
Wow, great presentations, Matt and Eamon. And it certainly sounds like there's a whole bunch of opportunities for collaboration on the Burkholz Institute and hopefully many other projects as well. Lisa, I don't know if there are any questions for Eamon or Matt at this point.
We don't have any questions yet for Eamon or Matt. Senator Bewley has posed some questions related to the previous presentation, so I've asked Eric Brown to answer that one in the chat, so everybody will have that answer. And if anyone has any questions for Matt and Eamon, please go ahead and type them in the chat and we'll make sure to get an answer. And I'll say I'm really pleased to hear about the opportunities to collaborate with both these organizations so far. And it's great news to hear that in Canada there's going to be something similar to Great Lakes Congressional Task Forces. That's really good.
Awesome. Thank you again, Matt and Eamon. Appreciate your time and the presentations. Now we'll move to our last speaker, Mike Pisker from the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Governors and Premiers. Mike is going to tell us about an exciting and innovative collaboration that encourages environmental sustainability, economic growth in the Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence region. Mike, I appreciate you being here, and you now have the floor.
All right, thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Thank you to Senator Charbonneau and the other members of the caucus for the invitation to speak. I really appreciate it. Thanks to Lisa and her colleagues for handling all the arrangements. So as Senator Charbonneau mentioned, I'm going to talk about the Great Lakes Impact Investment Platform, which is a relatively new project spearheaded by the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Governors and Premiers and a project team, which is listed on the next slide, please. So as you can see here, Great Lakes St. Lawrence Governors and Premiers is a nonpartisan partnership of the 8 states and 2 Canadian provinces in the Great Lakes St. Lawrence region. And the organization has found its roots in the early 1980s as the Council of Great Lakes Governors work on a broad portfolio of issues from water management through the Great Lakes Compact, maritime transportation, aquatic invasive species, international trade, all focused on the mission of environmental protection and restoration and sustainable economic development in the region. So the Impact Investment Platform is really kind of fits nicely into that sweet spot. We've been very fortunate to work on this project over the last several years with a really talented team ECT, which is a great environmental consulting firm, particularly their office based out of Ann Arbor, Michigan. The Nature Conservancy, which has helped to develop the environmental metrics framework, which I will talk about here. And I've just lost my slides. Sorry about that. And then two institutes through the University of Michigan. One is the Smart Infrastructure Finance, which is led by a faculty member at the Ross School of Business, and then the School for Environment and Sustainability, which we're currently working on a number of things, including building out a reporting framework and dashboard for kind of showing progress over the coming years in some of the projects. Over the years, we've also had guidance from Caisse de dépôt, the public pension fund in Quebec, BMO, and a kind of wide range of others. And we have outside counsel from a law firm based in New York City called Oric, which has a deep impact practice. So on the next slide, you'll see here, this is kind of the thesis. So I think, as we all know, the water of the Great Lakes in the St. Lawrence region, of course, we all know it's 20% of the world's surface freshwater, but of course, it's also really the source of prosperity for our region, has been and will continue to be into the future. And as long as we can properly protect and manage those waters, this can be done in perpetuity. As you see here, sort of a source of renewable natural capital. The region has had a lot of success in recent years, things like the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, a lot of the state and provincial efforts to deal with some of the issues of the past. But what this initiative really focuses on is, recognizing we have ongoing needs to restore and protect different environmental assets, and to think about ways to bring private capital to bear. There's, as I'll get to in the next couple of slides, there's a tremendous amount of capital seeking not just a financial return, but to do something with that and to do something beneficial for the environment. So next slide, please. So as you can see here, this was, as of earlier in 2020, $12 trillion under management that's seeking some sort of, again, not just a financial return, but that return plus as kind of the parlance, some sort of benefit in terms of impact, in terms of sustainability. That globally, it's exceeds $30 trillion, so just absolutely tremendous amount of money. And next slide, please. As you can see here, this is kind of, what is the trend here? A growing number of investors total, particularly younger people. But it's not just individual investors, it is large institutions, it's pension funds, it's large financial organizations, foundations, and others, again, seeking positive financial return, yes, but also seeking to make a demonstrable impact. The chart in the lower left shows, this is just focused on green bonds, which I'll talk about one in particular later on, but this shows the growth just you can see in the last 7 years, from essentially very little or nothing up to many hundreds of billions of dollars. And that number will continue to grow, I'm sure, as we see it for the rest of 2020. It will be much higher than it is there. Also should mention on this side, has already begun and will continue to be in the years and decades to come, a great transfer of wealth intergenerationally, particularly as those people who might fit into the 18 to 34 bracket now get older, have greater assets, and are looking to deploy that in a way that is doing something positive for the world. Next slide, please. So again, getting back to the impact investment platform, how do we foster that long-term sustainable management in a way that is focused on these projects and strategies, which has demonstrable impact, focused on the region's waters. And I'll talk about some of the different metrics and things we're tracking, but everything comes back to the water for the reasons I mentioned before. And again, looking to generate those competitive market-based financial returns. And you see in the graphic there kind of that virtuous circle of return and impact and improvement to the Great Lakes St. Lawrence. Next slide, please. We've been very fortunate also in terms of support for this project. We've received some grant monies from the Great Lakes Protection Fund, which is a partnership of the state governments, the Fund for Lake Michigan, based out of the Milwaukee area, and then the U.S. Endowment for Forestry and Communities, which is a nationally focused foundation. Each of these has provided some grant monies for, first of all, getting sort of the idea developed and the platform launched, for individual project development in certain ways, and then now currently from the Protection Fund, a current grant to build out kind of the data and communications portion of the platform. Next slide, please. So these are, so ESG is a very commonly used term these days in the investment world, environmental, social, and governance goals. In this instance, we're focused on the E of ESG. And you can see here sort of three major goals of looking to reduce nutrient inputs to sensitive watersheds, increasing energy efficiency, and then a reduction in emissions resulting from that reduced energy use, and then things like sustainable forestry and nutrient management. Next slide, please. And these fit within kind of four thematic areas within the platform you see here. So we have forestry, smart water systems. Smart water systems can be things like drinking water and stormwater utilities, but also have broader applications as well, kind of looking at technology applications to improve efficiency, agriculture, and energy. In recent years, our organization commissioned some research kind of looking at the different economic clusters that really drive the region, both with BMO and also with the Harvard Business School. And that helped to inform, why these four were selected as the thematic areas. And then of course, they all have some direct connection to water as well. Next slide, please. So in terms of projects that are eligible to participate on the platform, you can see here, there's basically kind of four big things in terms of the project itself. So the project must have a plan for how the proceeds will be used. It'll align with the themes and those goals that I just mentioned on the previous slides. Some anticipated environmental outcomes, and of course, these can be sort of estimated at the beginning, but this will be tracked as you see on the fourth bullet there, annually against the reporting metrics we developed by the Nature Conservancy. I should mention in terms of kind of eligibility, projects don't have to be within the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Basin. They can be in any of the states or provinces. So I'll talk in a minute about a project, for example, that's in Southern Ohio, well outside of the Great Lakes Basin, nevertheless still in the region. And then also projects must have some kind of external financing. So there's different ways we take a broad approach to that. There's different ways that can be looked at, but just wanted to kind of make that clear in terms of the types of projects. And on the next slide, we'll look here at those five kind of core metrics I mentioned that we developed in concert with the Nature Conservancy. So gallons of water saved, kilowatts of energy saved, carbon reduced or stored, nutrient reduced, and then some kind of permanent protected status for forest and farmland. So that could be something like a conservation easement. It could be a sustainable certification for a agricultural project, things of that nature. So any one project listed on the platform might have two of these goals or metrics it's reporting against. It might have one or three. That's fine. They might have other things they're looking to track as well. That aren't included here, and that's fine too. We have a way to sort of capture that, but these are really the five that that the platform is focused on tracking on an annual basis to kind of see progress, both in terms of individual projects and then in aggregate. Next slide, please. So just to give you an example of a couple of the projects that are listed now, you can see here Real Assets. This was a forestry project in northern Wisconsin, at the time the largest such project in the state. This was basically purchased through sort of an equity model where Lime Timber raised funds to purchase, I believe it was about 90,000 acres of forest land. They worked with the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources to get a permanent easement on that land, and then sold it to a third party, but it puts that protective status in place. There's carbon revenue from the project, and really just a great example of the type of thing we're looking to promote. In a much different project, Green Lending, the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewerage District was able to take advantage of a state revolving fund loan to do some stormwater improvements to reduce nutrient runoff and combined sewer overflows to Lake Erie. Similarly, on the next slide, 2 more projects, just to give you kind of a taste of the range of things we're looking at here. An environmental impact bond. This is the project I mentioned in Southern Ohio. For those not familiar with the environmental impact bond, it's basically a pay for success model. Quantified Ventures pioneered this. The first such project was actually focused on stormwater and green infrastructure in Washington, D.C. So some on the call, on the webinar, probably heard of the DC water bond or environmental impact bond. So basically it's taking that sort of pay for success model where beneficiaries of the project are can become payees to the project or investors, and being able to align those two things. So this was basically taking an abandoned mine in Southern Ohio, doing environmental remediation, and then building a mountain biking trail where then the revenues from that tourism dollars will help to pay back the bond. And then a green bond in Milwaukee. This is MMSD, the Milwaukee Metropolitan Storage District, which will be both the first green bond and also the first climate certified bond in our region. And this will be focused on a broad range of stormwater, green infrastructure, and other projects they're looking to fund in Milwaukee. So very exciting. One I don't have listed here, which I did want to mention, the city of Euclid, Ohio was also similarly able to benefit from some green lending to be able to do some shoreline access and remediation in their area. So another exciting project, which we've just been able to list recently. Next slide, please. So, what are the benefits here to participating on the platform? First and foremost, reputational. We have a website, Great Lakes impactinvestmentplatform.org, where we feature projects. We have a quarterly webinar series, including one coming up on November 13th, where we usually take that time to feature 1 or 2 projects and talk about them in depth. We invite participants to the governors and premiers summits that happen every 2 years, and just otherwise use it as a platform for them to promote the project. Similarly, access to different kinds of investors that they might not be able to always have access to. The data collection and performance that I talked about before. Technical assistance from our project team, which has a kind of wide range of ability. And then in some instances, kind of modest capacity building grants to get projects up and running, which we've done in a couple of instances. And on the next slide, one thing I want to mention, we have recently launched a project or a sort of initiative called Delivery Partners. And these are organizations that would not, beyond just having like a single project to list on the platform, they would be looking to have kind of a collaboration where they can enroll projects directly if they know they're going to have kind of a steady stream of eligible projects over coming years. So it's kind of the next step in participating. I would encourage members of the caucus, both if you have projects in mind, if it's an SRF project, if it's something like a PACE finance project, state agencies or others who might be sort of fitting into this delivery partner framework, we're definitely interested to hear about that and encourage you to encourage them to check out the platform and participate if there's a interest. On the next slide, please. So this all gets to kind of the impact of the impact investment platform. You can see here we have 13 projects. We just added the 13th one this week, representing more than $1.5 billion in sort of total project revenue. And we do align these with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So you can see the 8 here that are sort of addressed by the projects. So any single project might have 1 or 3 or 5 of these of the SDGs. But this is the way we've sort of set up the framework. So 13 projects and more than $1.5 billion. The platform was just launched officially in early 2020. So we are feeling really good about where we are so far and want to continue to add new projects and new partners and welcome any assistance on that from the members. And I believe this is my last slide if you want to go to the next. Yes, so contact information here for myself and my colleagues, Dave Nafsker and Peter Johnson. I want to stress participation is free and voluntary. To enroll, you can go to the website. We have sort of an automated form that can be filled out. The only commitment is that annual reporting, and then of course kind of fitting within the qualifications that I mentioned earlier. So I know we're getting short on time. Thanks everyone for their time and the invitation, and welcome any questions that anyone might have.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate the great presentation. I think we have maybe a minute, Lisa, if there is any question in the chat room.
I don't see any questions in the chat. I made a note, Mike, that I will share in the follow-up message to this meeting, and then also with the rest of the caucus members, I'll share links to the investment platform page and also the webinars that you mentioned. Same thing
Excellent.
for the city's initiative. I'll make sure I send. I did attend one of the webinars. I know Senator Charbonneau said everybody's getting webinar or zoomed out, but I'll share those pages where people can register for those events too, because they've been very good.
Awesome, thank
And
you.
if anybody has a question, now would be the time to ask it either in the chat or raise your hand. Senator Bewley, your hand is still raised, so if you still have a question, go ahead and unmute your line. Otherwise, if your question was answered in the chat, then you can go ahead and lower your hand. Okay, back to you, Senator.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. And again, thank you. I guess we'll silently, as a group, thank all of our 5 presenters today. And this has been a fantastic session. And I want to thank Lisa for lining these presentations and the presenters up, because I think it just drives home the point that there's a whole lot of good going on around the Great Lakes, and we're becoming a part of the process and a part of the group. I mean, we've heard from the Great Lakes Commission, the governors and premiers, and the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Cities Initiative. And I'm going to add the 4th one now, the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Legislative Caucus. It's just fantastic. And as I said at the beginning, my hope was to elevate the Great Lakes Legislative Caucus to a point where we're part of the overall discussion. And I am so glad that we're not forcing our way into that. The caucus has been welcomed with open arms by every one of these organizations. And we're now part of, when I look at a flow chart, it has the Great Lakes Commission, the governors and premiers, the cities initiative, and us. And there's connecting lines between all of them. And that is going to have, I believe, a massive positive impact on how we all do to protect that wonderful worldwide 20% of the fresh water. And it's critical, and we're now being a part of it. So sorry for wandering there a little bit, but these presentations to me drove home the point that we have a role to play in this, and everybody is beginning to recognize that. Folks, we're almost done. If you would stay with me just for a little bit for the business session now, which begins now. I promise that we're going to wrap up by 10:30 or somewhere near 10:30, but I think we should be able to make it. We're now going to vote for the incoming executive committee and chair and vice chair of our caucus. And as we adapt to the new normal, I kind of led us into it during the last committee meeting, when we vote, you can either raise your hand or yes in the chat, or the adaptations that I've made, you can smile or blink your eyes, and we will consider those a yes vote. You see in front of you the slide that has the incoming slate of officers, and we now move to elect the executive committee and the officers, the incoming chair-elect, soon to be, and vice chair-elect. The nominating committee just did a fantastic job, and I want to thank Senator Rest, Senjum, Mahrath, and M&A Belanger, and Representatives Butler, Carroll, and Patterson for serving on that committee. If these are the members who will lead the caucus that you see up there right now, and I'm not going to go into background at this time, but Robin Gable, I mean, since I've been involved, Robin's been there, and Jennifer Schultz has been there, so we know they're just actively engaged in making the Great Lakes Legislative Caucus a continually improving. So with that, Lisa, you can shake your head. Do I just make the motion that we elect at this point Robin as chair and Jennifer as vice chair?
Well, you can seek a motion to elect the entire slate, including the executive committee members.
Fine. As you can tell, I'm a strict enforcer of policy, and sometimes. But anyway, I would like to make a motion to that we elect Robin Gable as the chair and Jennifer Schultz as the vice chair, and the folks that you see on the chart in front of you, and again the nominating committee did a fantastic job, because what we're seeing is certainly a continuation of the organization, but also new blood coming into it, which is very important for any organization. We have some returning members, Representative Sheehy and Sonny, MPP Jennifer French, and MNA Gilles Belanger. And we also will be welcoming back Representatives Milroy from Wisconsin, who served previously on the committee. And as I said, it's great to see new faces coming to the committee, namely Senator Carrie Rood, Minnesota, Assemblyman Mark Walczyk of New York, Representative Sonia Harper of Illinois, David Abbott of Indiana, and Joe Tate of Michigan. And you will be comforted to know that Senator Rest and Senator Jacques will be continuing to serve as the support system for the executive committee, and they will hopefully allow me to join their esteemed caucus within the caucus. So I will make the motion after rambling here to take the officers. And is there a second? Yeah, we have a second, I see. And all those in favor, if you would raise your hand, say yes on the chat room, or smile, blink your eyes.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, there we go.
Yes.
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 Awesome.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So, thank you so much, and all those who are opposed, please either stand up and turn around, or say no. Okay, the The motion is unanimous. We have a new chair, vice chair, and new executive committee. And I want to thank everybody so much, because the work of this organization is, I am very impressed. And believe me, it's not because of me. It's because of the folks that are members of this caucus and are committed to working to improve the Great Lakes legislative, or Great Lakes St. Lawrence area. And thank you all. We now are going to move to resolutions that we have to consider. And normally in the past, we have allowed the vice chair to handle this portion of the meeting. So Robin, are you there?
Thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. The bandwidth isn't quite working. I can't see anybody. Nobody's face are showing up. But as long as you can hear me, that's good. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for voting. I really appreciate it. It's going to be an exciting period the next 2 years. We have much to do, and these new alliances are just very exciting. So thank you all. So the first 3 resolutions were all passed by the GLLC in 2017, and they will sunset at the end of this year unless we adopt them again today. So given their status as current positions, I ask for unanimous consent to consider resolutions 20-1, 20-2, and 20-3 as a group.
So moved. Second. Thank you, Ann. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Awesome. Thank you. Those opposed, please signify by saying no, or put no in the chat room. So, okay, the resolutions are approved. Robin? If we could.
So do people need a brief description of them?
I
was
No.
before we voted.
Yeah, I don't think so. Everybody should have had them in their materials for quite some time now. So in the interest of time, no.
Okay, good. So thank you, Chair. The next 3 resolutions are all sponsored by Indiana Representative Mara Candelaria Reardon. Resolution 24, recommending lifting the private activity bonds volume cap for water and wastewater projects. Resolution 20-5, recommending federal rate relief remedies for low-income water and wastewater customers resulting from the COVID-19 health emergency. And Resolution 20-6, calling for federal guidance and state planning to address potential contamination from PFAS chemicals. So I'm asking for unanimous consent to consider these resolutions as a group, 20-4, 20-5, and 20-6.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor, please signify by the normal signs.
Aye. Yes.
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 Yes. Aye. Yes.
Okay, thank you. We'll take them as a group. Robin?
And then there is one final resolution.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Technically, we should ask about the no's, Senator. And then also I'll point out that Representative Candelaria Reardon to share some information on PFAS, and that is in the chat. But just to be official, I should offer a no.
Yes. Any opposition to the resolutions, please signify by the normal sign, standing up and turning around, or put no in on your the chat room. Okay, unanimous. Thank you. Robin?
And then the final resolution is proposed by my colleague, Illinois Senator Laura Fine. It's Resolution 20-7, and it urges the GLLC to educate members about the dangers of coal tar-based seal coats and other high pH sealants. And I move for the adoption of the resolution.
I'll second that motion. All those in favor, normal sign, please.
Aye.
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 Aye. Okay, those opposed, the normal signs? Okay, the motion has passed, and
Okay, and then, Mr. Chair, we do have one more resolution to consider, proposed by Senator Rest, and I ask for unanimous consent to consider Resolution 20-8, which should now be available in the chat.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Senator Gable. This is a resolution honoring Senator Ed Charbonneau, who is our retiring chair now, and I would like to read it since it is brand new. Whereas Senator Ed Charbonneau of Valparaiso, Indiana, has served with distinction as chair of the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Legislative Caucus in 2019 and 2020, and before that date, as Indiana's elected representative on the GLLC Executive Committee from 2015 through 2018, and whereas recognized throughout the region as a champion of clean water policies, Senator Charbonneau's legislative accomplishments have included creating an interim study committee on Indiana's water resources and policies, commissioning a statewide study of water utility infrastructure needs, establishing Indiana's Water Infrastructure Assistance Fund to improve public water systems, and promoting the replacement of lead service lines by allowing water utilities to incorporate into their rates the cost of replacing customer-owned lead service lines. And whereas under Senator Charbonneau's leadership, the GLLC launched the Patricia Burkholz Institute for Great Lakes St. Lawrence Policy, with the inaugural institute in 2019 focusing on nutrient pollution and planning underway for the 2021 Institute on Climate Resilience. And whereas in both 2019 and 2020, Senator Charbonneau was instrumental in having September 7th declared as Great Lakes St. Lawrence Appreciation Day in the state of Indiana. And whereas the caucus is a far better organization, thanks to Senator Charbonneau's thoughtful leadership, his commitment to the GLLC's mission, and his absolutely fantastic outlook on life, exhibited here today, I might add. And whereas his frequent claims to the contrary notwithstanding, Senator Charbonneau doesn't need anyone's help to look good doing what he does. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the members of the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Legislative Caucus do hereby express our most sincere appreciation for Senator Charbonneau's past service to the caucus and to his continuing role as past GLLC chair. Madam Chair, I move this resolution.
I proudly second.
thank you. Well, I'll leave comments for later. All those in favor of the resolution, please signify by saying aye.
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 Stand up and dance.
Aye.
All those opposed, same, no, not same sign. Stand up, please, and turn around. Well, okay, the resolution passes, and I do not want to comment right now. I'm certainly not Well, no, I'm not sure what to say now. But Ian, I appreciate all of your help. I firmly believe we have a great organization here, and I absolutely have enjoyed my role as the chair of the committee, the caucus. It's pretty easy when you have someone like Lisa, who just keeps me on the straight and narrow. And everyone that's been a member of this organization has nothing but the best interest for all of us in mind. And time and again, what are we going to do? Somebody stands up and says, "This is what we're going to do," and it follows. And it is just a fantastic honor, number one. I appreciate it very much, and I can't thank everybody enough, but I probably want to say something a little bit more organized manner at our next meeting, which is in December at some point. So this has been fantastic. It's been fantastic for me from day one. In closing, I want to thank, we can never do something like this without thanking our sponsors, the Joyce Foundation, the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation, and the Fred A. and Barbara M. Erb Family Foundation. And once again, we have had a great meeting with some fantastic presentations, and I'm glad we're a part of it. So with that.
Senator Charbonneau, I hate to interrupt. And it's always a pleasure to work with you. I want to say a few words too before we go. But we do have one more item on the agenda, and it is the invitation to 2021.
Oh!
And I believe we have M&A
We have to go somewhere, Ed.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Lisa. Is the communication good? You can see me? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Lisa. And thank you, Senator Charbonneau. First, I want to thank you for your leadership, everything you did. So it's a great standard. And I want to see you next September in Quebec City, beautiful Quebec City. I want you to be part of the next annual meeting in Quebec City. I'm quite confident we'll be able to hug and shake hands because COVID will be behind us. I want to thank Lisa, the speakers, and all the one involved with this year virtual meetings. And I'll get back to you. And Senator Charbonneau, if you want to end this meeting with closing remarks. And thank you very much again, and hope to see you next September.
Well, I hope you do also. One of my fondest memories is the meeting that we had a couple of years back in Quebec City, a great host city, a beautiful city, and I can't. I was still pretty new to the organization and walking around in a fog, and ended up having just a fantastic dinner with Senator Rest, Senator Talion, in a charming, and there's a fourth person, I apologize, I can't remember, but I may come up there even if in a Pope mobile or something, just totally enclosed to get back to that city. So I'm looking forward to it. Lisa, have we now?
We're done with the official agenda, but before you conclude, I wanted to put out the word to the current members of the executive committee. Please stick around. after everyone's gone. We started last year the tradition of getting a photo of all of the executive committee members together. And so we're going to do that again, even though it'll be virtual. So current members only. The future members who take office next year, you're going to have a chance to get your first picture taken together in Quebec City. So, but thank you. And Senator, back.
Okay, thank you, Lisa, again. Thank you, everyone, for it's just remarkable participation here today and remarkable presentation. So, and once again, and thank you for your kind words in the resolution. So I will have more to say about that. So everybody get ready when we get together in December. So with that, if I can have a motion to adjourn. Okay. And I will second that motion. So all those in favor, please signify by the normal sign.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed to adjourning, please signify by saying no or standing up, turning around. We once again have a unanimous vote and we are adjourned. Thank you.